So first and foremost, thank you all so very much for taking the time and the curiosity and the headspace to be here. I know it's Monday. I know it's still somewhat working hours on your time zone. So all the more appreciative of being here. And I was thinking, let's put some slides together. And then I was like, hell no. I'm not going to go for death by PowerPoint. And I am here, to advocate for really bringing back the value of meaningful conversations in doing change work. And then what kind of fraud would I be to say, welcome, let me share my screen. So no slides today. And I was thinking to really build a conversation. And what we can do, I will just share a little bit about myself. I will start sharing some reflections from me doing change work for 2 decades now. And then we just see where the conversation takes us. And no slides, not aiming for having a blabathon either. So I'm not here to hear myself speak, but let's just see how this goes. And I just want to check that everybody is okay with having this recorded. And it's simply for the Outlier project internal use only. So you will not see yourselves tagged on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and the such. So good to go? Does this sound okay? Wonderful. I think most of you know me by now, but just to make sure that you all hear the same version of me at the same time. So I am here today from Basel in Switzerland, but originally I'm from Romania. I was born in a mixed family, so I'm half Romanian, half Hungarian. You can actually see Hungary from my mom's balcony. I oftentimes say that that was my very early on accelerated onboarding into diversity and inclusion, caught between the Orthodox and the Catholics who couldn't agree on the same date for Easter. I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. So yeah, I left home when I was 15. I left for a scholarship to the US, and I spent some wonderful time with Syracuse University. And I never really went back. The time that I stayed in Romania was mostly Bucharest. And then slowly but surely, I became a serial immigrant. So lived and worked in 15 countries over the past 20 years. I can pack anything in a cardboard box in under 3 minutes. I actually bought furniture for the first time in my life 2 years ago when I was 42, and I almost had a heart attack, like, oh, okay, now I need to become a responsible adult. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. So I love change. I do consider myself a change enthusiast, and no matter what roles I had across my career, I was a disruptor. And I love to challenge myself, and I love to challenge people. I love questions more than I love answers. And I oftentimes say that the secret to change work is not to have all the answers, but to make sure that we ask all the questions. So on the fun fact, most of you know this, but I do come from the part of Romania that is called Transylvania, and I am allergic to garlic. So that put me in many fun situations. I had dinners rescheduled because of new moon and full moon. And I was like, can we not have that conversation? You know, I haven't had a serious dinner in the last 127 years. So just let's move on. But we have this online, so you should be quite safe. I am a journalist by trade. You probably heard me say that. I was trained to be a war correspondent. I was ready to go to Iraq, but I fell in love and got a marriage proposal, and the marriage didn't happen, which I dodged a bullet, ironically. But I worked as an investigative journalist for 8 years, and then I accidentally bumped into change management, and the rest is history. My biggest mentor, if I can say that, in doing change work has been my time as a journalist. And there are a few things that I carried with me. First, that it's never about yourself and it's never about your role, but it's about your ability to sense make for other people. And most of the time, those people don't have a firsthand exposure to the information that you have. So how can you help other people make sense of what is going on, especially when emotions are running high, when, you know, they hear 10 versions of 100 different stories. Bear with me, math is not my strong suit, every day. And when oftentimes the leaders say, we've been communicating this for the past 3 months. What's unclear? What's still to be communicated? Another thing that quite frankly saved my soft parts on many occasions is the reflex to triangulate information. So unless you hear it from, you know, at least 3 unrelated people, it's just rumor. So that really, really helped me many times. One thing, because you were warned that I like to disrupt. I hear an echo and I don't know where it comes from. I'm looking.
It was fixed. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So one of my personal and professional crusades for the past 2 years is to eliminate the expression change management and replace it at best with change work. Because I've been thinking why within organizations change is felt so much more disruptive and so much more threatening and so much more complicated and sophisticated than change in our everyday life. And one theory that I came up with is because within organizations, when we hear change management, what we hear the loudest is the management part, not so much the change. And then we tend to become over-reliant on frameworks and methodologies and tools. And if we look at the vocabulary within organizations that is used to describe change and leading change and navigating change, it is mostly tools-driven. Yeah, we perform stakeholder engagement. We perform leadership envisioning cockpit section, whatever that is. We have an engagement plan. And I tested this over the past 2 years. It started in July 2020. I started writing about what everyday things teach me about change management, wanting to re-anchor people in everyday things. Just to say, change is so present in our everyday life. Why do we make such a big deal out of it in organizations? And why do we, bear with me, this is a word that it takes me forever to pronounce correctly, compartmentalize how we deal with change in life and in work. So that's what I've been doing. I've been trying to tell people, hey, there's nothing wrong about frameworks and methodologies and tools, but how are you going to use them? And what happens within change before it becomes change management? The most recent example is I got a request through the community of HRBPs where I work at the moment. And they told me, we need a workshop, like a 2-hour workshop, and then a toolkit that we give managers for them to lead the change within their teams. And I was like, wonderful, that's a dream come true. Because I've been saying, I was asked during my recruitment process of all the opportunities, how do I define success for a change manager? And I said, I do believe that the best measure of success for a change manager is when they make themselves redundant. So I was like, my dream is about to come true. I will just have this workshop, send the toolkit in the organization, and I can move on and do some other exciting stuff. So I said, look, before I start to do anything, I would really love to have a handful of conversations with people requesting this. I want to understand what it is that they are looking for. And guess what? Nobody was asking for an Excel spreadsheet for stakeholder engagement. Just give me 1 second. Oh. But they were looking for answers to questions like, you see, this is how change happens. It's disruptive, and I have a disgruntled senior stakeholder. It's because of the thunderstorm. But they were getting questions from their teams like, why are we changing again? And when is this change gonna end? And when are we going to change again if we change it now? So I personally don't know any framework or any methodology that will make anyone more comfortable dealing with those kind of questions, not only from their teams, but from their own selves as well. So I tell people, in my mind, change work is a 3-legged stool. And you have mindset, skill set, and tool set. Most of the requests come in the form of, give me a methodology or give me a tool. And until that person gets something that gives them back a sense of control and a sense of management, they are not hearing anything else. Yeah, but do make sure that if you do give someone a hammer, not everything that they will see from that day on is a nail, and start a conversation. So this is the first sharing, and I'm really, really curious how that resonates with you. Yeah, where's the roadmap? I want a plan. And I said, wonderful, I will give you a plan. What's the change? Well, you're the change guru, you tell me. One thing that really gets my blood boiling is that expectation that, you know, you have a change manager and they will do their work in blissful isolation with their tools in an office, not asking too many questions, and good luck. So I'm really interested if this resonates at all with any of you, if you have stories or if you have a question.
I love it. I love this topic. and I think you touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear your thoughts even more. I think people freak out about change sometimes because leaders don't always necessarily do a good job of connecting it to why the change is being made. And so there's not a clear idea throughout the organization why you're doing something. It's just, okay, now we're doing this instead of that. So you're taking people from comfort to discomfort, but you're not explaining why. And I think if you explain why, like, then you go, okay, I'm willing to go through the discomfort.
Yeah, I love that point. And, you know, blanket statement, doing change work can be quite lonely because you're challenging people. And oftentimes your role comes down to, I think Simon Sinek calls it, being comfortable with being the idiot in the room. Being there and saying, I don't understand. And, you know, I see the lovely PowerPoint slides, but what does that mean to me? What do you want me to do different starting 9 a.m. tomorrow morning? So that's something that I do quite often. Scott, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that a lot of change efforts kind of feel, I would describe them as too checklist oriented. You know, like the times I've taught some change management to groups, and let's say I'm using John Cotter's 8 steps for change, right?
Yeah.
Some management, they just want the steps and then they just start working down, but they don't invest the time. And to me, where I see them slip up is, you know, where Scott went. It's, you have to spend the time communicating the why. That's almost the hardest step. And then you actually have to communicate and over communicate probably 3x, 4x more than you realize at multiple levels before you start getting into the nuts and bolts of the administration of the latter steps of, let's say, Cotter's model. But it's where I see, and I've failed too, where I've just made it kind of a checklist. I said, yep, I did this. And I have no strategic communications plan built into this thing. I have no engagement strategy built into this thing at all, which are very, very important.
Yeah. Are you up for a fun short exercise? Let's make this interactive. Okay, so could you please just grab a sheet of paper, just a normal sheet of paper, ideally one that you won't be using after this. So yeah, just grab a sheet of paper. And then it's gonna be very, very easy. I'm gonna ask you to hold the sheet of paper in your hands. Close your eyes, don't cheat, because I am watching you. So close your eyes, and then you will have to follow a set of 3 very, very simple instructions, but you cannot peek, you cannot ask each other anything, and you cannot ask me anything. So, sheet of paper, close your eyes. Fold the sheet of paper in 2. Fold the sheet of paper in 2 again. Rip off one corner. Now open your eyes and open your sheet of paper. And show it to the camera. Yeah. So oftentimes when I am asked to explain change and why do we need clarifying and why do we need communication, I run this exercise. We never took the time to clarify and align on what good looks like. It might very well be the case that good is not having the exact same outcome, but we never agreed on that either. Yeah. We never checked whether everybody had paper available. I didn't tell you have a sheet of paper available. I saw Scott, walking around to get a sheet of paper. I had people saying, hey, I do everything on a tablet. I don't have a sheet of paper available. Yeah. I play the role of a leader. Maybe I have been thinking about this for the past 3 months, and I ran all the possible scenarios, and I'm like, how much easier can I make a set of instructions? Fold a sheet of paper twice in two and rip off one corner. How wrong can we go? I'm sure you felt the need to ask me something. I'm sure it would have been so easy to peek at each other and at least align amongst yourself what good looks like. Yeah. So the communication was simply one way. Yeah. Just very, very simple exercise that can trigger a lot of good conversation. And talking about communication, one of the things that literally gives me a skin rash is when I hear leaders saying, oh, we have nothing to say this week, let's cancel the town hall. And I'm like, no, that's one way. The town hall is there for you to listen even more than you speak. And about 2 years ago, I was the change lead on a project, Future of Work project. And I call them the hop on, hop off coffee hours. And every single week on Wednesdays, in person on site, and Thursdays online over Zoom, I was there and I told people, I am here for 1 hour and this is your hour. Show up. If you want to be here for 2 minutes, okay. If you can make it this week, not a problem. If you want to be here for the full hour, come. And, how do you feel? And what do you think? And what has changed? And what have you been hearing around you? And that really, really built the change community, And it brought to light the need for collective accountability. We had loads and loads of complaints, and I think some of you heard me say this during the Top Talk, loads and loads of complaints around IT equipment not, functioning properly. And what we actually realized was that we were piloting hot desking. And because, if this monitor is not working, I can just take my laptop and move one desk to the right or one desk to the left. Nobody ever opened a ticket with the IT department. So because of one monitor not working, by the end of the day, 20 people were saying the IT is not working. Yeah. So how do we embed this collective accountability? I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but a few years ago, I got really fascinated by overlapping Lean Six Sigma to change work. And there's a growing amount of research and conversation around the waste of change management. And one of them, quite, off the bat, is overanalyzing. Like, let's do one more survey and one more round of whatever, and let's ask one more person. There has to be a cutoff date to inputs. The other one, and that came quite a surprise, and this, make people do a double take. We talk about under planning quite a lot, but we almost never talk about over planning. And there is such a thing as over planning. And I see it most often, and I don't mean to finger point in any way, shape, and form, but I see it mostly amongst consultants, wanting to prove how seasoned they are in running similar changes or similar interventions. they start off with a 1,763 lines of tasks, yeah, and timelines and time frames. And I always challenge them, saying, hey, I understand that this is, an estimative outline and guideline, and you just want to, put the message out there that you will go as granular as possible. But what if this plan is seen by someone who is not witness to our conversation today? Yeah. Would they have the same expectations, or would they say, oh, this is something that was agreed, and now, back to your point, Scott, this is the checklist. So whether it applies or not, we have our shoes, and we will execute them, irrespective of whether we need flip-flops or caterpillar boots or whatever. We have this plan, and we will do it. Which brings me to being over-reliant on tools. And the story that I say is, when I tried to place a complaint against the complaints office of the railway company in Romania. So about 20 years ago, let's say that the Romanian railway company should not be allowed anywhere near the country branding effort. Is just horrible. And I called and said, look, the trains are just horribly delayed. And a guy explained to me that, well, yes, on short distances, you have short delays, and on long distances, you have long delays. It was very logical in his mind. And I said, no, I have a problem with the delay itself. And he said, okay, so we will get back to you in about 2 weeks. 3 weeks later, I called and I said, I want to place a complaint. Yes. And I want to place a complaint against the complaint office. And there was silence. And then he said, I can't register that. I'm like, why? I don't have a column in my table. I can't check the complaint office. It's not in my form. And I'm like, write it on a Post-it note. I don't care. So quite an extreme story, but hopefully it drives the point that we cannot allow tools to drive us. We drive the tools. And what I tell people that I work with is, the tools are there to help you to discipline your common sense and to help you to make the information you have in your head available to other people, visible, and in a format that more people can make sense of. That's why you have the tools. You don't have the tools for the tools to run you. You have the tools so that other people can understand what you're trying to say, and to build mental reflexes to take stuff out of your head and available for other people. So, yeah, this is a heavy one, because they're like, what do you mean we don't need tools? And I'm not saying we don't need tools, but how are we going to use them? Yeah. What's the thinking behind choosing one methodology over another? Scott, you mentioned, Kotter's 8-step. I very lovingly call that the Lucy of all change management models, because everything that came after, it has a little bit of Kotter DNA in it. You probably heard of the ProSci-ETCAR, which is the change methodology with the best search engine optimization behind it. It's all over the internet. You have Rogers technology adoption, with the early adopters and the laggers, and then the bell curve in between. McKinsey's 7S. I don't know, some PCI, people-centered implementation, a lot of methodologies, but how do we use them? And my favorite two ways in change management is the couple of obsessing over resistance. I don't know in your experience, but I always have come across to obsessively and almost exclusively targeting the change efforts into turning, resistance into enthusiasm. Now, like, we have to make people embrace the change. And I have come to love resistance, because oftentimes that tells me that there is something there that people want to protect at all costs. It might be a team dynamic. It might be a customer relationship. It might be something that in everyday real life, in a process, it makes sense to keep more than it makes sense to change. So I oftentimes tell people, we don't want to use change management. May we go a little bit informal here? Do I have your permission? You probably heard me say this before, but we cannot go on using change management as the Viagra of project management. Yeah. And using it just to push people through the meat grinder and putting a smile on their face. It's just not working. So what I would really love to encourage you is understand the root cause of that resistance. Oftentimes, it's something that people want to protect. Yeah. There's this wonderful saying, go for the main problem, not the first problem. Yeah. But what we tend to perceive is that if we address the first problem, we get our sense of control back. But that's a Band-Aid. Yeah, and it will come back to bite us. So resistance is good. It tells us something. Another thing, and usually these come in couple, is over-enthusiasm, yeah, and overselling change. There is the SOS, the shiny object syndrome, yeah, and I love it when leaders tell me, oh, no, we don't have that. We're doing things agile. And I'm like, no, you're doing things fragile, yeah. You don't even have patience to see if something works. And even worse, you don't even have patience to see what you can learn from things that didn't work out. Yeah. And that's not agile. And one of the questions that probably will get me fired sooner or later, I ask people, do you do agile or are you agile? These are two very different things. Just because you use agile tools doesn't mean that you have an agile mindset. And it's the same with change. Just because you use change management tools doesn't mean that you're managing change. Yeah. So I am very happy to finally have landed in an industry where I can say, so I worked for a time for a company in agri-tech. And one of the things that I keep saying is that, a farmer doesn't plant a seed and then digs it up every week just to check if something happened. Yeah. But patience and trust are pretty much the first things that get thrown out the window when the going gets tough. So I'm having quite a lot of fun these days. I love what I do, but I also tell people that change work comes with a lot of grief and a lot of loss and a lot of challenge to our very innermost sense of validation or safety or security. And, sometimes I hear, oh, but, we're not losing anything. And I'm like, but of course we are. Yeah. What is this project changing? Is it changing, the result of a project that was someone's promotion or someone's professional status? Yeah. Is this changing some people's, speed of promotion or learning? Many of us still link our sense of identity with our work. Yeah. And when that is touched in any way, there are feelings that need to be acknowledged. But we don't do it that often. I'm always surprised. I've incorporated a design thinking exercise in my change work, the 1, 2, 4 all, that basically stands for individual work, then dialogue, small groups, and then team sharing. And I ask people, take 5 minutes and sit with your thoughts and sit with your feelings. And sometimes we have topic-specific questions and, write them down. And I literally saw people, for example, writing groceries lists. They couldn't sit with themselves for 5 minutes. And I'm like, then how do you build those pockets of stillness in your work? Yeah. I must admit that US Navy SEALs are quite popular in my work because I use a riff of slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that is quite popular with the leaders that I'm working with. And there are 3 acronyms that I want to tell you about. FOMO, you probably heard. Yeah, the fear of missing out. Look at what people are doing and challenge what is it that they are doing just because everybody else does it. Yeah, and we don't want to miss out. Then there are other decisions that are made from a place of JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. Yeah, like I will absolutely not do what everybody else is doing. But the most meaningful acronym in change work is FOFO. And I actually heard about this during a Noodleberg huddle. And it stayed with me, and I've been using it in my work. It stands for fear of finding out. And I see so many leaders shying away from going to the main problem because they don't believe that they can handle what they find, whether because of their own emotional or, governance maturity, or whether they don't think that they can deal with the emotions that they will find, or maybe they don't want to find out how they will think and feel about what they will find out. So I have designed an exercise where I ask people to think about their FOMO, JOMO, and FOFO. And, it sounds a bit funny, but it triggers really, really deep conversations. And funnily enough, one supporting tool is the Wheel of Emotions. It's fascinating how emotional literacy has such a long way to go still amongst leaders. So yeah, I promised not to go into a blabathon, but I'm not keeping myself very honest to that. Please stop me. I could talk about this forever and ever. So Mark, you raised your hand.
Absolutely, Minola. I've been taking notes. This is actually a really cool topic, not only at an organizational level, but our own personal lives, how we run into resistance. I feel like I have a new perspective in trying to figure out what someone or something is trying to protect. So it's now a little bit more of an informed approach. But you mentioned like the FOMO, the JOMO, the FOFO. That is, it's all emotional based. It's all sort of like a fear based approach. Now, when you speak with organizations, do you sort of vet out why they're initializing this change? Are you trying to figure out speed and intention and is it just a pure root cause or perceived issue that they're giving to you that you're trying to solve for, or do you actually challenge them a little bit and say, well, maybe you should think about this instead? I mean, how much do you push back when you're presented with a project in general?
I personally probably push back more than the average change manager. And that pretty much comes from the fact that I don't believe that change management is an implementation tool. It should not be an implementation tool. And in full honesty, I have walked away from work when change management came very late into the project and it came to be corrective, directional, purely transactional. And I walked away. I also challenge people, for example, when they say, oh, we don't need change management yet because we're not close to implementation. And I'm like, that's, for example, that happens a lot in technology projects. And when I was in Malta working on a core banking transformation, I told them that, unless you start doing it, then go live will be go dead. And it is what it is. I normally push back on asking people, what's the change? And just having a conversation. And I'm like, look, let's forget the label, whether it's change management or project management or other management. Walk me through it. Take me through your mind. Make me see what you see. Describe it to me. And then we will take it from there. And I saw it in the chat, with explain it to me, Tom. I think it was you. Explain it to me like I was 6 years old. That's a saying, and you all know by now that I love Einstein, and we have a special relationship. And he said, if you can explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it enough yourself. So I have this icebreaker that people either love or hate. This is like the licorice of icebreakers. And I call it the Einstein challenge. And I tell people, explain the topic of whatever as if I was a 5-year-old. Yeah. And that really, really triggers something in their mind. And I'm like, no buzzwords. Yeah. We're not doing corporate bingo today. Yeah. I'm a 5-year-old. Explain it to me. Simply. And it is painful to see how difficult that is. Yeah, because we got so used to the corporate lingo and we got so used to the buzzwords. And one of the things that I keep telling people that I work with is English is not everybody's first language. Yeah. And amongst native speakers, there is a certain degree, I call it strategic ambiguity. Yeah. It's like, oh, come on, they know what I mean. And I'm like, no, I don't know what you mean. You're not speaking in my language. My whole life is about to change. And I don't understand. Explain it to me simply. In journalism, there are several exercises, or maybe it was just my professor who loved to torture us. Write something without adjectives. Yeah, don't describe it at all. Explain something without using any kind of descriptors, no adjectives. And we realize that objectivity is utopic. Because, for example, we could all sit next to a playground, yeah, and maybe I'm having a headache and I say that the children are screaming, but maybe someone who has kids at home, yeah, they would say the children were playfully going around their business, yeah. So whether we say that we cry or we shout or we scream or we yell, that says something, especially when you communicate to people who are not native speakers. Yero, I see your hand raised.
Thanks, ma'am. Let me first say that I didn't know that I could love you more, but I love you more now after this hour. So just throwing that out there. So I had another question, but maybe I'll follow up with you sometime on it. Sustainability. So do you know of the projects, you've been doing this work for a while, do you know if the change that you have implemented organizationally has stuck? Because I feel like it's a behavior change, but also needs to be supported culturally. And even if the initiation happens and is supported by management or whatever else, whether or not that behavior change becomes then part of the habituated behavior, you know, sometimes that doesn't happen. So do you know if the work that you implement gets carried through regularly?
I do know, and I still struggle if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I do know. There are many ways to see whether a change, you know, is sustainable. And I think it all comes down to behaviors, because that's what we see. But those behaviors, they are anchored and enabled by deeper things. So I know I said we're not talking about frameworks and methodologies, but many years ago, I was preparing a workshop on change. It was Change 101 for the Ministry of Rural Affairs in Estonia. We were doing a project with them. And I was like, okay, how would I explain change to someone? What's in my head? And I got snowed in my hotel. It was a snowstorm in Tallinn. And the only thing I had to keep me company during that weekend was my laptop and the minibar. So between these two, I came up with an acronym. And I said, I will use change and each letter of change to explain something. So C for me stands for clarify. Yeah. Let's clarify the vision. Let's clarify, you know, what we're after. And if nothing else, let's clarify how we are going to get clarity as we move along the way. Yeah. H stands for harness. And that pretty much covers the stakeholder engagement, because you have energy and you have enthusiasm and you have resistance and you have all you need inside your organization. So it comes down to how do you harness that? How do you engage it? Yeah. A stands for advance. How do you advance this? Mainly through communication. Yeah. N. N stands for nurture. Yeah. And nurture covers everything related to L&D. Not just training, which oftentimes people say, oh yeah, change management, training and comms. Yes, and thank you and see you some other time. Yeah. G stands for grounding. And grounding for me goes all the way through the rippling effects. Yeah. How do you create an organizational environment that makes that change sustainable? Is it changing the job descriptions? Is it changing the governance framework? Is it changing process, policies, procedures? Is it changing your onboarding programs? Is it changing your recruitment matrix? Yeah. Is it changing, I don't know, your organizational design and your organizational structure? Do you go through an OD? Yeah. And E stands for empower. How do you make sure that everything that you do gets embedded into culture? And there's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's called I'm Afraid Debbie from Marketing Has Left for the Day. And it's written by an amazing behavioral scientist. And he starts with a story with a call center agent coming into work on a really bad day after a family, fight at home. And he's on the phone with a screaming customer and looks into a poster with a corporate value of be customer centric. And he's like, how do I prove that I am customer centric, where it takes everything I get not to say on the phone? Yeah. And he's like, okay, I will call the marketing department because they came up with the posters, and I will ask them, okay, how am I customer centric in this situation? And the answer is, I'm afraid Debbie from marketing has left for the day. And then the entire book speaks about how all these corporate bingo stuff, yeah, we have system 1 and system 2 in how we make sense of the word. And all this corporate fluff speaks to system 1, yeah. But what we do every day speaks to system 2. And these are fractured. These are not being connected in any way. So one of the questions that I ask the people that I work with is precisely this. How will you know? How will you see that we've done good? Describe it to me. Tell me, what do you hear within the organization? What do you see within the organization? What do you see in the mirror? Because a lot of leaders, they want change by proxy. Yeah. So you go change the organization and tell me what you need. What do you need? You need a bit of extra budget. You need corporate values posters. You need an offsite. No, I need you to do the exact same things that you ask people to do. And one of my soapbox is, I keep telling people that the project team is the first environment where we need to exhibit the behaviors that we want the organization to grow into. And I got kicked out of a project, and I am so happy. I consider that one of my biggest successes. So I was on a project, and we were talking about how we need to streamline the communication within the organization and how we need to be mindful and intentional with not, suffocating people and their calendars with mindless meetings after meetings. And I said, look, how are we going to do this inside the project team? I'm looking at my calendar, and out of a 40-hour legal weekly workload, I have 32 hours in project meetings alone. Yeah. So how are we going to try and pilot the behaviors that we want to embed within the organization, starting with this team? This is the best pilot that we could do, and it's safe and it's a learning curve. Why don't we do it? And I got my calendar freed up, and I was so happy because that allowed me to go and work on another project. So yes, that happens. So change, clarify, harness, advance, nurture, ground, and empower. That's how I talk about change.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I know we're already 1 minute over time, but I am very, very grateful to you all that you are here. More than happy to take this conversation further, either in a group setting or one-to-one. But I do believe that change is wonderful, and not only when it happens to other people.
I think this is great. Am I echoing? Am I echoing?
Yeah, a little bit.
Kathy, I think it's you. Yeah, I'd love to, we should plan on doing this again. I don't see these as like one and done. We've got plenty of time slots. And this is such a great topic. And to have a resource like you in the group is so powerful, because we're all leaders in some way, and we're always going to go through change, whether it's personally or professionally. So to have somebody like you as a resource is like phenomenal.
Thank you. I would like to share something in true outlier fashion. One of the biggest learnings that I took back in my change work, I actually learned in therapy a few years back. I got this assignment from my therapist, go home and write a list of things that you love and, things that give you joy. So I went home and I started building lists, like this is abstract stuff, and this is food and yarn and concrete stuff. And then this is, more on the experience side. And then I try to, build one list. I almost made an Excel pivot out of it because little. And I went back to my therapist in about 2 weeks, and I was like, I got my homework done. And she was like, okay. The first red flag should have been, her staying completely silent for 40 minutes. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I am so good, She has nothing to say. And then she earned her money literally over the last 5 seconds with one question. And then he said, the time is up, you go home now. She said, how long does this list need to get before you list yourself? So I'm like, thank you for the trauma. Now take my money. So I took that question and I incorporated it when I work with teams on their stakeholder analysis and mapping exercise. And I'm like, think about all the stakeholders. And I stay silent. And they write and they write and they write. And I'm like, think outside the box. And they write and they write and they write. And then I'm like, how long does this stakeholder inventory need to get before you list yourselves? Why are you doing this? Why do you believe in this? What do you need to continue to believe in this? And that's one of the most powerful questions that I have discovered in my work. It took a lot of childhood trauma to learn it, but it was all for a good cause.
Love it. Love it. This is
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful as always, my friend. Thank you.
I tried a takeaway. The only time it failed was when I worked with our leadership team in our packaging business. When I told them that, don't think inside the box. Don't think outside the box. Think like there is no box. I truly believe in that.
Spoken like a true outlier.
Duck the box.
Awesome. We've got some cool additional power hours coming up. So I'm excited about that, and continue to, like, if anyone wants to do one, do it. If you think it's something that you need to build over time, feel free to block off multiple dates. We incorporated a lot of dates so that people could do that. We had a member say they wanted to do like a mini book club and spend like 6 sessions talking about a specific book. You can do anything you want. This is your time. And if you think you've got, something that would be beneficial to the group, whether it's one session or whether it's multiple sessions, I would just say, get your application in, and we'll carve out the time to do it. Minola, this was phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And please know I'm more than happy if it triggered questions, or if you have, like concrete questions, just reach out to me. You know how to reach me. You can find me either on Mighty Networks or LinkedIn. Most of you have my WhatsApp. Just reach out. I'm always super happy to listen, and then talk.
I was watching a movie, Minola, with Meg, and this kind of highlights to me like how significant change is. It was about a guy who was in prison, and he was in prison for quite a while, and he got out, and he didn't know how to deal with the change, so he purposely committed a crime to go back to prison. And just shows you how wired we are for the comfort of, what we're used to. And when you incorporate change, even when change is freedom, sometimes that will cause people to freak out and say, I'd rather choose this, which seems crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, just saw that over the weekend.
Really a great point, Scott. I kept thinking about that as Minola was speaking, because in some of the change work that I've done with organizations, in particular, a couple of, kind of tyrannic leaders that have been, over the course of the work, convinced to make a new decision. And the surprising element of that is, even when you are relieved of a leader who is oppressive, you are terrified of the unknown so much that you still would prefer to stay in that space, even though everything about that situation lining up at my doorway was all the bad, scary things until the person was gone. And then they were, oh, what's happening, right? It's terrifying. It's terrifying. People will cling to the known so fast when not given the option or the information. So,
yeah, but not only that, this obsession with give me the tools and give me the methodology. This is tell me what to do. Yeah, this is I don't know what to do when I am free to make decisions. Yeah, and I keep telling them, if this was not within organizations, what would you do? Because there's this pressure of, making a decision foolproof, like not making a bad decision. And I had a conversation with my best friend. She visited before Christmas, and the conversation, went into the book. she said, you know, you've been doing this for like 20 years and I still don't know what you do for a living. And I'm like, you and me both, but you know, we're too sober to have this conversation. And I told her, look, you have high stakes communications every day. You have key senior stakeholder engagement every day. You have crisis management every day. You just call it spending Christmas with your in-laws. Yeah. At Syngenta, we call it digital transformation, but it's the same. In principle, it's the same. The only thing that makes it easier to manage in your everyday life is that I don't say, oh my God, I need to make a stakeholder engagement intervention with Tom and Tim and Jamie. I say, I'm going to call them and have a chat and see what they think. About 5 years ago, I was out for dinner with the program manager on a project. And he said, we need tools, we need more tools. And I asked him, what do you think about conversation? Do you think that conversation is a tool? Because unless you see conversation as a means to get you somewhere, if it's not in an Excel spreadsheet, if it's not in a PowerPoint slide, if it's not in a Word document, if it's not in an email, it means that you didn't work. But we make most of our work through conversations. But we never look at conversations as tools. We look at them as just conversation, you know, it's not a tool. It is a tool. And the moment you think about conversations as tools, you start to be intentional about it. What do you want to get out of this conversation? Take 5 minutes before going into it to really clear your mind and keep your emotions in check. And think about what do you want to walk out of that conversation with? What you're ready to invest in that conversation? What are your walk away points? Do we need an Excel spreadsheet for that? Maybe at the beginning.
This was awesome. I gotta get ready for Kathy Lecky's birthday party.
Yay! And tomorrow is Kofi's birthday. And Kathy, I apologize for mixing up your dates. And I wished you happy birthday last Monday and this Monday. I will wish you happy birthday next Monday as well, just to...
It's a tremendous tactic to use the day before or even the belated, because you're one of like very few. It's a great tactic.
Yeah. Thank you all
Thanks,
so very
Minola.
much. Thank you. Ciao.
Yes, thank
Bye,
you,
guys.
Minola. It was phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.